My name is Shelby, and I'm 62 years old. I live alone in a one-story house on the outskirts of Tokyo. Since shortly after my birth, my parents got divorced, and I was raised in a single-parent household. Fortunately, after the divorce, my father provided sufficient support, and I was able to attend the university I had hoped for. Afterward, I joined a reasonably well-known company, and, through a colleague's introduction, had an arranged meeting leading to marriage. My husband loved flowers and often helped me with the gardening. Though it's a small garden, perhaps due to good sunlight, grass often grows in places where there are no stones or other objects. Since bending over is difficult, on weekends, my husband would help me with weeding. Since my husband would bring out the car, we would go to the home center to buy flowers and branches each season. In the summer, he even bought a hoe for a home garden. My husband loved the small garden. "Someday, I'd like to turn this garden into a small rose garden," he said, and just then, we were blessed with a son. The dream of a rose garden turned into a small campsite. Fortunately, there's a large park nearby, so we didn't get scolded for making a bit of noise in the garden. On days off, we pitched a tent in the garden and went camping with our family of 3. We even bought bricks and made a small fire pit for campfires. We cooked rice in a mess tin and made curry over the campfire. On holidays, my husband treated us to camping-style dishes. He would even make elaborate dishes like pizza and roast beef. Amidst the busyness, we were enjoying our days. However, not long after our son started working, my husband. He fell seriously ill and passed away suddenly. My son's name is Cash, and when he was young, he was a kind and gentle child who cared for me. However, it seems that his personality started to change around the time he entered university. Moreover, after my husband's passing, his selfishness became more pronounced, and he would say, "I'm capable on my own now, so don't bother me." You could say he became more independent in a way. Feeling lonely might be due to, perhaps, me getting older. My son ended up marrying the daughter of a business associate he met through work. At first, the prospective mother-in-law seemed to look down on my son, who grew up in a single-parent household. But the prospective father-in-law said, "Talking about family background these days is outdated. If the two of them are content, that's what matters," which led to my son marrying into their family. The wedding ceremony took place at a prestigious shrine near the bride's family home. The ceremony at the shrine, with both traditional Japanese and Western attire, was enchanting and truly magnificent. My son looked quite dashing in his tailcoat. The traditional Japanese attire felt like a tribute to my late husband, bringing tears to my eyes. Though it's quite sad to see him leave home, I'm proud to witness my son's special day. I wish my husband, who loved children, could have seen it too. When we were invited to the bride's family's home for pre-wedding greetings, I was amazed by the size and grandeur of their house. Being in the countryside, it's what you'd call a mansion. After marriage, my son decided to leave his current company and join his wife's company. Thus, they'll move from Tokyo to her hometown upon marriage. I could sense remnants of the refined young lady from an old family in my daughter-in-law. Despite being in Tokyo, they live in a small suburban one-story house. It seemed like she was looking down on me a bit. It's likely because of my single-parent upbringing, she might think of me as a poor person living on a pension. "I hope you don't find this rude, but may I ask something?" "What is it?" "Do you find life financially difficult, Shelby?" "Thank you for your concern." "Well, yes, I'm managing to get by thanks to various means. Our family home has a well-known history. Plus, my father is the CEO of a prominent import agency, so we come from a wealthy and prosperous background." "Do you know about that?" She was naturally boasting about her family background. "So, Shelby, are you expecting any financial support from our family?" "What do you mean?" "I'll be straightforward. I hope you understand that we can't allocate our family's money to cover your living expenses. So, you assume that I'm poor and that I would ask for financial help from your family? Is that what you think? Yes. I have never considered anything like that. Maybe not now, but eventually you might. I wondered about the kind of unpleasant people she might have encountered, and the kind of upbringing she had, which worried me more than being angry at her attitude. You don't need to worry about that. Oh, is that so? Please remember those words. Saying that, my daughter-in-law left in a huff. I could understand quite well from her reaction just how much she deviated from common sense. One day, after a while, my son and his wife visited my house. I wanted to warmly welcome my son, whom I hadn't seen in a while, so I prepared many dishes that he liked. Since my mother was from Kansai and I grew up with lightly seasoned food, I made vegetable stews and simmered fish dishes. However, it seemed too bland for my daughter-in-law from Tohoku, who said, "These dishes are quite plain and poor-looking. Don't you have more meat or something?" I'm sorry, where I grew up was near the sea. I'm good at fish dishes but not so much with meat dishes. That seems like a very frugal meal. I received quite the harsh comments. It wasn't that impoverished, you know. I barely managed to argue back, but I realized that she probably couldn't judge what counts as poor. Well, we're not poor. My son, who rarely agreed with me, joined in. Still, serving dishes with just vegetables and fish does seem meager. Also, not just the house, the garden is simple too. Her condescending remarks didn't stop. Even though it looks simple, I really like this garden. I couldn't contain my anger and ended up responding harshly. Oh, by the way, Mom, her family's meat dishes are amazing. Tohoku has a lot of famous brand beef, and once I had that meat, I couldn't go back to fish. I became captivated by meat, you know? Suddenly, my son switched sides and started defending his wife. Come to think of it, her family was from a well-known beef-producing region in Tohoku. Please try the local beef. It just melts in your mouth. Oops, sorry, we always eat expensive high-quality stuff, so it might be tough for you, Mom. She said this, putting a hand over her mouth, and chuckled. Suppressing my overflowing emotions, all I could do was force a wry smile. One day, a few months later, I was invited to my wife's family's house. It's the end of summer and there are fewer tourists, so how about it? That's what they said. The heat had also significantly subsided, as my son mentioned. With no particular plans and rarely having a chance to visit Tohoku, I wasn't particularly thrilled about it, but I didn't want to be rude by declining outright. So I accepted the invitation. As a souvenir, I brought a traditional confection from an established shop in Tokyo. You really didn't need to do this. We've had things like this so many times that we're tired of them. But since you went through the trouble, we'll take them. Thinking about how she was that kind of person, I handed the gift over with a wry smile. As we walked inside, led by her, while mentally bracing myself that everyone here was an enemy, I couldn't help but marvel at the impressive house of my in-laws. They had a splendid garden too, recently renovated. Walking along a charmingly long corridor, we admired the pond's fragrance of cypress as koi elegantly swam and rare birds that I had never seen in Tokyo sang in the trees. These koi cost around $70,000 each. Although there aren't many, I chose quality over quantity. After conversing at her parents' house, my son and his wife invited me to a nearby luxury hot spring inn. They boasted about the luxurious hot spring facilities and high-quality Japanese beef. The hot spring had a faint scent of cypress emanating from the well-crafted wooden bath, and its silky spring water washed away the weariness of the lingering summer heat. The area around the outdoor bath was enveloped in lush greenery, with occasional bird songs and the babbling of the river. The meals were also quite lavish. I wasn't someone who could eat a lot, so I informed the landlady in advance and had her prepare a small portion, allowing me to savor every dish. The high-quality Japanese beef seemed to be adjusted to my age, and the lightly seasoned cold shabu-shabu was very easy to eat. Indeed, this inn is wonderful. It should be a leisurely time spent here, if not for the snide remarks from my daughter-in-law. The next morning, for the sake of expressing gratitude and saying goodbye, I visited my in-laws' house, and as we all enjoyed tea together. I appreciate your kindness this time. Thanks to you, I had a great time with good hot springs and delicious food. This expression of gratitude marked the beginning of a confrontation. Oh, it's nothing really. There's no need for thanks over something like this. My daughter-in-law prepared for battle. Even more so, I'm grateful to have a son who found a good family. Thank you very much. I uttered words I didn't truly mean. But I'm more concerned about you, Shelby. After seeing your house, I started worrying a bit. You're living off your pension, aren't you? It might be enough for regular living, but won't you eventually come seeking help from my family? I really want to avoid that, if possible. As I mentioned before, I've never even considered such a thing. Tit for tat. It's probably something that could happen in the near future. So, I wanted to make sure before that time comes. And my daughter-in-law got straight to the point. What do you mean by that? In order to provide you with some enjoyable moments with your son, I invited you this time. Did you have a good time? Yes, I definitely enjoyed myself. That's good. Well then, this will be the last time. We have a connection between us. What do you mean by that? If my mother-in-law were to become a beggar or something similar, our family's name would be tarnished. And once something happens, there's no going back. So, I want to sever this connection. Beggar. Sever the connection. Completely baffled, I repeated her words. So, from today, I'm cutting off ties with you. I managed to suppress the anger welling up within me from the wife's blatant condescension by taking a deep breath. All right, if that's what you want. Responding calmly, I said, I'm relieved that you're willing to accept. We've prepared the bullet train for your return. Goodbye. While I was furious about how my son and his wife treated me, I felt a sense of relief that I wouldn't have to meet that rude daughter-in-law again. Afterwards, to calm my heart, I went on a trip to my beloved Kyoto. Since then, I stopped sending money to my son, and as I had severed ties, there was no obligation to give him the dividends from the stocks I inherited from my father. My son begged me to continue secretly, but I declined, saying, I won't support you since we're estranged. My son's only hobby, a vintage car he took care of, apparently got sold as she said. It looks outdated. My financial assistance was kept a secret from my daughter-in-law, and it seemed my son, controlled by her over finances, only had the allowance I provided. Well, my son is also at fault for not being able to stop his wife's outrageous actions, so there's nothing I can do about this situation. Just then, I heard that my daughter-in-law's father had fallen ill. Though he survived, due to a stroke, he couldn't continue working as before. As a result, my son and his wife were to take over the family business and company. The family of my daughter-in-law is quite wealthy, but, due to their rather forceful business practices, their reputation wasn't very good. With my son and daughter-in-law becoming the management, many business relationships that had been dissatisfied before are gradually ending their transactions, and the business seems to be declining significantly. Although he is the father of my daughter-in-law, I should ideally pay a visit to offer my condolences, but due to being estranged, I refrained from doing so. Perhaps that wife of his shares a similar personality with her father, and I wonder if she might pursue business in a manner similar to him. While this is just my personal opinion, I don't really see my daughter-in-law as having that much business acumen. She's selfish and constantly looks down on others, so the future is clear. As expected, the company's sales have decreased, and the new business that my daughter-in-law proposed ended without much success, resulting in increasing debts. Even the main import business, inherited from the previous generation, struggled to perform, and it was evident that the company was in the red overall. Amidst this, a major reform took place. Under the new direction of my son, who became the new president, the company's main operations were downsized, and entry into new divisions was decided. Interestingly, it was my daughter-in-law who made this decision. My son, who was just a figurehead as the representative director, was not able to intervene in this major reform. However, this also turned out to be a major failure. The management continued to deteriorate. I had been keeping an eye on the stock prices and trends, but due to continuously hitting the lowest point, there were no dividends. And the evaluations from the Shikiho, Japanese stock market annual report, and securities firms were terrible. It's probably inevitable that the company will be delisted. If it gets delisted, raising funds will become even more challenging than now. Bank loans will be difficult to secure, and the only option remaining would be selling off assets. Though my daughter-in-law's family owns a lot of forest land, being in a rural area means it's unlikely to find buyers quickly. However, I am someone who has been estranged. No matter how much I agonized over it, there was nothing I could do. So, I continued to lead a modest life as usual. Afterward, I received a few messages from my son and his wife, but I kept my distance. Then came autumn. While enjoying the fall colors and the usual sightseeing in Kyoto, something unexpected happened. As I leisurely indulged in the autumn beauty of Kyoto with my eyes and taste buds, an attendant called out to me, "There's a guest waiting for you." I had no recollection of any promise, and not many people were aware I was in Kyoto to begin with. "What is the name of the guest?" "Yes, the person's name is Rachel." Rachel. After a moment's thought, I immediately remembered. "We're acquainted, but there are circumstances preventing me from meeting her." "I'm sorry, please convey my apologies and ask her to leave." "I see, understood." The attendant stepped back momentarily, returning with a troubled expression. "She insists on meeting you at all costs. She's even kneeling down in apology. How should we proceed?" "In that case, there's no choice. Please show her to the guest room. I'll prepare myself and come shortly." I returned to my room and changed into a more appropriate attire. "Thank you for waiting. It's been a while. I believe we're estranged, so I'm curious about the purpose of your visit." I greeted her in a composed manner. "It's been a while. I've come to ask for your forgiveness, to apologize for my numerous impolite behaviors in the past. I'm truly sorry." I stared at her wordlessly. Her face turned pale in response to my distant attitude. "I've heard that this magnificent mansion belongs to you. I'd like to know how you came to possess such a splendid residence. Could you please share the details with me?" She must have heard about my background and was desperate for financial help. It's obvious that she came here in desperation, like clutching at straws. I smiled wryly and said, "It's not something I would discuss with a guest," as I brushed her off. And then, after a pause, "This is my father's villa. I inherited it from him. My father's name was Frank Sean. He's deceased now." "Does that mean my mother-in-law is the daughter of the president of the Sean Corporation?" Upon learning new facts, my daughter-in-law panicked and seemed flustered. "I am my father's child from a previous marriage, and I carry my husband's surname now. The current president is my half-brother. Our mother has already passed away, and I've distanced myself from the Sean family. By nature, I'm not suited for business, and I've relinquished the management rights to my brother. Before my father passed away, he entrusted me with a portion of the company's shares, and this house. I see. I didn't know. My daughter-in-law seemed relieved, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. I myself am a novice in stocks, so I don't trade. I receive dividends twice a year. It would probably amount to around $70,000 or so. I'm not fond of flashy lifestyles to begin with, so I'm able to live comfortably enough. My younger brother manages this house, and there's a resident housekeeper. Visiting here every time the seasons change is one of my pleasures. Perhaps my daughter-in-law was rendered speechless. She kept her head down and didn't move. By the way, what is the purpose of your visit? You are aware that I've been estranged from you, right? Yes, I understand. Our family business isn't doing well, and if it's okay with you. My daughter-in-law pleaded while wringing her hands. The truth is, my father fell ill, and Cash took over as the president. However, since he was inexperienced, I thought it would be better if someone with blood ties like me took charge to help Cash. So, my son was just a figurehead and you held the actual management power. Yes, that's how it turned out. Perhaps realizing that further excuses were futile, she began speaking candidly. Then, I took the lead on a new product concept, which failed, resulting in significant losses and debts. I tried various things, but it was already beyond repair. So, you located my whereabouts to ask for assistance. Yes. I sighed. So, you want me to help you? Yes, please, I beg you for assistance. Do you remember what you said to me? If my memory serves me right, you decided to cut ties with me, because you said a destitute mother begging for money would be a nuisance. What's the meaning of your actions now, after all that? It's a plea for money. In society, we call that begging, you know. You're right. With a faint smile, I pronounced my decision. I refuse. I don't want you to underestimate me. After looking down on me so much, it's too late to ask for help now. I'm sorry, but please, somehow. My daughter-in-law prostrated herself, rubbing her head against the floor. Without paying any attention to her, I stated, I'm not a person who can give charity to beggars. Please take her away. The guest is leaving. Escort her to the entrance, and then sprinkle salt there as well. The housekeepers, numbering several, carried her, who continued prostrating herself, and, lifting her to her feet, dragged her out of the room. Some time later, her company went bankrupt. They liquidated everything, including the land and the house. With the remaining meager funds, they rented a house, and the entire family worked part-time jobs to make ends meet. My son, after the company's collapse, seemed determined to stand on his own, and I haven't received any communication from him since. As for me, I continued living in the modest one-story house as before. A small, comfortable house filled with memories of my husband. In the small garden, mimosa flowers bloom in spring. A tree that my husband planted in the year our son was born. Mimosa invokes memories of our honeymoon trip to France with my late husband. Eating omelets and creme brulee with no common language, strolling down cobblestone streets, exploring antique shops, and visiting art museums. Seeing roses blooming in the palace square, he once said, I'd like to create a rose garden like this. Pink roses and yellow mimosa, both bought little by little and displayed on the windowsill throughout the stay. We bought a baguette to eat, but the hotel meals were so delicious that I had a hard time eating it, which also became a fond memory. Small yellow flowers. Every time these flowers bloom each year, they remind me of that day. I do worry about my son, but he's gaining social experience, after all. Choosing that wife was his decision. I hope the two of them will overcome hardships together. I prayed to my husband's altar. As the wind blew and the mimosa swayed, it felt like my husband was watching over me and my son. I recently planted a pink rose bush that my husband loved. I think he would have chosen this flower. With that thought in mind, I intend to spend my remaining time in the small garden, nurturing the roses he dreamed of, all the while cherishing the memory of my departed husband.